Okay, looks like we're connected. Hello, everybody, and we'll just jump right in. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Um, I was inspired to uh, try and discourse about this topic, time and space, because lately I've been on and off reading Oswald Spengler, the German philosopher from the early 20th century. And one of the interesting insights that he has in his work is that every civilization has a unique take on space and time, and it got me thinking. Uh, he mostly deals with uh, modern European civilization compared to classical ancient Greece and Rome. Uh, he calls the classical civilization Apollonian, and his term for the modern civilization is Faustian. And looking at the ancient Greek civilization, he said that they had no real appreciation or sense of past and future. They lived in a kind of eternal present. And he cites a number of examples. I think the most striking was in the first page of Thucydides' Peloponnesian War. He says, Thucydides says, uh, before my time, nothing of note has happened, which is a remarkable statement considering that Thucydides lived a generation or so after the Persian Wars. And Spengler's take is that for the Greeks of Thucydides' time during the Peloponnesian War, even the Persian War had faded into kind of myth, and it held the same space in their consciousness as the Trojan War. They were very much in the moment, very present oriented. And he compares this to the Egyptian civilization, which he also deals with considerably. He said they had almost no sense of the present. They saw long vistas of past and future, and they were very oriented to preserving things to last into the indefinite future. So they built monumental buildings, and they mummified their dead, so that to try and preserve a kind of eternity, everlasting, expansive time into the future. He deals with Indian civilization very briefly. I don't think he really knew all that much about it. I don't think he studied it to any depth. He did make the remark that the whole of Indian past before the thousand years before the Buddha passed like a dream. I'm not really quite sure what to make of that. But my observation about India for a long time has been that their sense of time is cyclical. And we dealt last week with talking about the cycles of humanity's rise and fall, and the creation and destruction of successive worlds, and cycles within cycles. Even on a very mundane level, we have the cycles within cycles is obvious in the day. The day is a cycle, and then a longer cycle is the year. And for the Indian mind, a kappa was a longer cycle yet. And this cyclical view of time was very very central to the consciousness of the Indian civilization, to their Weltanschauung. They didn't have a sense of history the same way we do. They didn't see things that had happened in the past as being important or significant, and they didn't see a progress of change or development in any way. It was just cycles up and down. So they didn't regard their own historical past as something worth studying, but it was for a different reason than the Greeks. It's not that the Indians were limited to present moment, but that they saw time as being a fluid cycle, that things just repeated endlessly. And this is the whole sense of samsara that we're trying to understand and to escape. The word samsara comes from the verb samsareti, to wander in a circle. And there's very much that sense of samsara as being is an endless wandering, a repetition. You know, we've done this before, as the Buddha said in a series of short suttas in the sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. The Buddha emphasizes the futility of continued existence in samsara with a number of very striking metaphors. He says, for example, if you could pile up all the skulls that you've left behind from being beheaded, either as a human or as an animal in past lives, the pile would be greater than the Himalayas. If you could gather together all the tears you've shed from the loss of loved ones, that would make a body of water greater than the ocean. So this is these are very striking and powerful images to contemplate. And after each of these images, the refrain that the Buddha gives at the end is enough, enough. And the Pali is balang, balang, which is a bit stronger than the English enough. It's like, that's it, enough. I've had it. Balang, balang. How long are you going to keep filling up the cemeteries? This is the essence of samsara. You live, you die, you leave your body behind. And the sense is that we do it again and again. And there's no real, although there's a vast array of forms we can take, there's nothing really new under the sun in the vast infinity of samsaric existence. And so this is actually, besides the cyclicity of time, this is another aspect of the Indian view of time, is the endlessness of it. The Buddha himself, it's well known that when he was asked about the beginning and ending of samsara, he said this is one of the unanswerable questions, that the beginning of samsara cannot be known, and it's just a waste and a source of perplexity to try and figure it out or understand it. But by the time of Buddhaghosa, the great commentator, it was pretty well established in the Buddhist tradition that samsara was without beginning, and by extension without end. Samsara is endless. And this is a logical conclusion given the importance of the principle of causality that's also very well established by that time. The principle of Abhidhamma, that nothing arises without a cause and nothing arises from a single cause. There's no randomness or arbitrariness in the universe. So if there's nothing that arises without a cause, there's no appearance or creation of anything ex nihilo, out of nothing. Everything has to have a prior cause. So by extension, however far back you go in time, if you cast your mind back to moment X, there has to be a moment X minus one. No, or else moment X would have appeared out of nothing. So there is no beginning to be found and no ending. So there was this sense of the vastness and even the infinity of time. And the Indian mind was very enamored with big numbers and large magnitudes and quantities. And we saw this last week talking about the length of time of a kappa, that the kappa is a world age from the beginning to the end of a world system, that it cannot be measured in years or tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. But to give a metaphor of how long a kappa is, if you had a block of solid granite, a yojana on the side, and a swallow flew by once every 100 years and brushed it lightly with its tail feathers, that block of granite would be worn down to nothing before the end of the kappa. So we have Indian sense of time is vast and cyclical and without real significance in terms of events. There's no historicity to it. Even the appearance of Buddhas is an archetypal event. There are in the whole cycle of the universe, there are an infinity of Buddhas. In this world system, there are altogether 5. There's a story in the commentary that really emphasizes the archetypal and cyclical nature of the appearance of Buddhas, who are all the Buddhas in this world system are said to gain enlightenment on the same spot. They call the Bodhi Manda in near Bodh Gaya in India. Exactly the same spot. They all sit down on their enlightenment night. And there's a story in the commentary that before his enlightenment, as you know, the Buddha was given a bowl of milk rice by the milkmaid Sujata. And after he finished eating his meal, he made an aspiration. He took the bowl and put it in the river that was nearby, the Naranjana River. And he said, if I am to attain supreme Buddhahood, may this bowl float upstream against the current. And it did. It floated upstream. So he took this as a sign he would be successful. And the bowl floated upstream a ways, and then it sank. And when it sank, it fell with a clink onto the 3 bowls of the 3 previous Buddhas. And then the noise woke up an ancient Naga who was sleeping curled up beside these bowls. And he opened one eye and he saw what had happened. And he said, "Oh, so soon again, a Buddha has arisen in the world." Now, one more aspect of time to look at. We've looked at the vast expanse of time in the Indian and Buddhist conception and the cyclicity, the cyclical nature of it. But in the other direction, there was also a fascination or an interest with very small units of time. And this this particularly comes to the forefront in the Abhidhamma, and in the development of Abhidhamma after the Buddhist time. Um, one of the concepts that became very central. It's not really original to the Abhidhamma, but became central to it in the development, at least by the time of the Abhidhamma Sangaha, the commentary on the Abhidhamma texts, is the concept of a Dhamma, which is in modern books you'll see it distinguished from Dhamma as the teaching. Although it's the same word spelled the same way, they'll often distinguish it by spelling it with a lowercase d and uppercase for Dhamma as the teaching. But none of the languages Pali is written in use upper and lower case, so this is entirely a modern affectation. I don't think it's entirely an accident that the same word is used. Dhamma as the teaching is, or as the universal law, as reality, is also Dhamma as a single instant of that. The simplest possible expression of reality is a Dhamma. So it's kind of an atomic theory. The modern Buddhist writer Shirbatsky, he came up with a translation for Dhamma as point instant, which is very good. I like that because it has this the implication of pointing to the nature of a Dhamma as being a location in space. That's the point. The mathematical definition of a point is a location in space without any extension. And the definition of an instant is a moment in time without any duration. So it's kind of like the sense in calculus of of this kind of mathematical instant. So it's different than like a second or a nanosecond. It doesn't have a length. It's just a point in time. So this is very much in accord with the basic Buddhist principle of emptiness, of sunyata, that the fundamental unit of realities without any substance. Now, there's a very interesting book on Abhidhamma that I would recommend. It's called Theravada Abhidhamma by I want to say Punnadhammo. Let me just look that up so I give you the correct name for this, the author of this book. Now, what I like about this book is that he takes a comparative approach, and he brings in here we go. Let me just pick this up and give you the name of the author. So he brings in early controversies and comparisons between different schools of Buddhism, because the early days of the development of Abhidhamma in India, there were the 18 schools competing with each other and developing their own slightly different takes on things. And a lot of the controversies centered around the nature and definition of a Dhamma, the ultimate unit of reality. And some of the schools took the position, as I've outlined, as a point instant without any duration or extension. Others felt this was too abstract, and they said it actually had a very minute duration and a very minute extension in space. There was also controversy whether there was space between the dhammas, or the dhammas touched each other and they completely filled up space. But before we segue into talking about space, the relation to time here is we're looking at the very briefest possible moments of time, uh, a single moment of consciousness. And there are mental dhammas and physical dhammas. And the mental dhamma is a component of a single cognition, a single moment of awareness. And in any case, however we define it, that they're extremely brief, and this is obvious both empirically and theoretically, that a single moment of consciousness is a very minute fraction of a second. Consciousness is flashing by very quickly. There was, of course, also, I've commented on this in previous talks, as an interesting idea to think about. There was one of the big splits in Buddhist history was the split at the Third Council. It was between the two schools, the Vibhajavadins and the Sarvastivadins. The Vibhajavadins are the ones who later evolved into the Theravada and became established in South India and Sri Lanka. And the Sarvastivadins became the dominant school in northern India and had an influence on Tibetan Buddhism later. The meaning of the name Sarvastivada is all exists. The Pali would be Sabba Asti, all exists. And their distinctive doctrine was related to time. They said that past, present, and future all exist. Whereas the Vibhajavadins, and that name means the school of analysis, they said you could analyze time into the three categories of past, present, and future, and only the present is actually real. The reality only exists for a moment. One of the explanations for the Sarvastivadin view that past, present, and future exists is that consciousness itself is a single moment outside of time. And the rest of the universe, every other khanda, an aggregate and external object, is arising in the future and moving backwards through time. And as it crosses the threshold of the chitta, it's experienced as present moment. And then it fades away into the past and becomes a memory. So this is quite a different way of viewing time, but it's actually not too far off from some modern physical speculations. Now, when we get to space, and I'll just refer back briefly to Spengler and his discussion of the view of space in ancient Greece and in modern Europe. He said that the ancient Greeks had no real concept of, just as they had no real appreciation of past and future, they had no real concept of space except as distance between bodies. That their emphasis was always on the bodies within space, and they had little concept of empty space or space as a quality on its own. And he gives the example of Euclid's geometry, and the way it was developed by other Greeks. That a geometrical figure like a triangle to Euclid was always seen as a solid object, even if it's only 2 dimensions. It was the 3 lines of the triangle are bounding an object. Whereas in the European mathematics, from Descartes on, the geometrical figures were seen as lines. The primary concern was with these lines as vectors in space, and the idea of an interior as being something significant was not really held. In ancient India, space was given a greater status than with the Greeks, I think, but in a different way, not the same way as in the West either. The universe as a whole was considered as infinite, just in space as in time. Although, again, the Buddha refused to speculate on that. This became the later tradition explicitly stated by Buddhaghosa that the universe extends, and the number of world systems is infinite. The world systems were conceived of as spread out on a plane, so in a two-dimensional space. And they were circular in nature. Each has a wall around it, and they butt up against each other. So the space is filled with these chakawalas, world systems. So on this large scale, the chakawalas take the place of the dhammas on the microscopic scale. They are the components of the greater universe, and they spread out in two-dimensional space to infinity. Space itself, there was this is another one of the controversies in early Buddhism. The Sarvastivadins held that space was an unconditioned element. Now, this is denied by the Theravada, who preserved the idea of asankata, or unconditioned state, for nibbana. They didn't allow it to be associated with anything less than nibbana, whereas the Sarvastivadins said that nibbana is unconditioned, but space is also an unconditioned element. So in the course of this controversy, the Theravadins probably felt compelled to define space, and there is a passage in one of the commentarial discussions, I think it's in the commentary to the Katawatu, but I don't recall for sure, about the definition of space according to the Theravada, is that space is of different kinds, and it's either conditioned or it's unreal. It's just a concept of the mind. It's conditioned when it's in a trivial sense. Like if you dig in a hole to make a well, you've opened up a space in the earth. So that's obviously conditioned. It's been conditioned by your labor with the shovel. So there's no real philosophical conundrum there. But space in the in the general sense, is only a concept of the mind. Um, it's a mental construct only to account for distance between bodies. So we say that, between the Earth and the Moon, there's 186,000 miles, and this is to use a modern example, and in between is empty space. Well, the space is really, according to this view, nothing whatsoever. It's just an abstraction that the Earth and the Moon have some reality, but the space in between is just an abstraction of our mind. They use the same, I don't know for sure what significance this would have, but the same word akasa is used for space and for the sky. So space was definitely considered empty and actually unreal. It's even less than empty. It's just a construct of our mind to account for the distance between objects. But just as in the case of time, the ancient Indians and the Buddhists in particular had a way of seeing vastness, huge distances. So they saw space as infinite, and there was also an upward, a third dimension, upwards through the heaven realms and the Brahma realms. And there's a lot of emphasis about how far above the earth the Brahma realm is. In one text, it says that if you dropped an anvil from the Brahma realm, it would take 4 months to reach the earth. You can try and calculate that distance, but it's not easy, because before the 4 months is out, using modern thinking here, before the 4 months was out, the anvil would be accelerating to relativistic speeds, and it would complicate the calculations considerably. But they had ways of trying to express the vastness and distance between the Brahma world and the earth. And even within a world system, the measurements are huge. Mount Sinnaru, at the center of the world system, is this giant mountain that's 84,000 yojanas high. And our best estimate of the length of a yojana is probably about 7 or 8 miles, but let's say 7.5 miles. And if you use that figure, about 12 kilometers. If you use that figure, the height of a yojana would be considerably greater than the modern idea of the distance to the moon. So these, and then around Sinnaru are vast oceans that are even of greater extent, hundreds of thousands of yojanas in diameter. So their conception of things was huge, which is in accord, of course, with our modern way of thinking. But we can forget how recent that is. That the Western conception of the universe before the 18th century really was very small. That Roger Bacon calculated the size of the entire universe and it comes out as being smaller than our modern idea of the orbit of Jupiter. So it still seems like, fairly big, but that's the entire universe, including all the stars and everything else. So just to summarize, the Indian view of space is vast, expansive, and empty, basically even unreal or non-existent. And the sense of time, again, vast and cyclical and repetitive. And that's, I guess I could also add a coda here that the view of space was also, in a sense, cyclical, or at least repetitive, and that Chakawalas all followed the same basic ground plan and just extend out endlessly in all directions, copies of each other. So I hope that that's some food for thought and some ideas about the way the ancient Indians and the Buddhists in particular saw space and time. Let's see what we got here in the chat for questions. Isn't time just a measurement of change? Yeah, well, that would be equivalent. Yes, that's one way of seeing it. That would be the equivalent of the view of space as just the distance between objects. We can say time is just the distance between events. So a day is the rotation of the Earth, and a year is the revolution of the Earth around the sun. And these are events that can be observed. What if the Buddha didn't die? Will he have become the Buddha still? What if he never left the castle? Does that mean it was predetermined or what? I don't think you can say it's predetermined. I think it was, you could say, like the Buddha leaving the home life. It's not a deterministic event, but it's karmically, what's the word? Required in a way. It's like he'd made that karma for so many lifetimes that there was really no alternative. He was going to leave the house and become a Buddha in that last life. But it's not the same thing as determinism, because he built that himself over many, many lifetimes. He'd made that karma. Next one, multiverses, each a little different. I'm going to just having trouble reading that. I'm going to expand the font. There we go. Multiverses, each a little different, mostly the same, stretched out into past and futures, parallel universes, each with the same pilgrimage places, but for a different Buddha. Yeah, that's actually not far from the Buddhist cosmology. Is that you wouldn't call them multiverses, but each Chakrawala had its own. Some of them would have their own Buddhas. Many of them were dark. They were dark eons when no Buddha arises. But when a Buddha arises, then they have an archetypal pattern. So there would be, again, the pilgrimage places. If you could interview Saka, what are some questions you would ask him? Oh, that's a good one. I don't know. Nothing really comes immediately to mind. I am recalling a Jataka story where a hermit meditating alone on an island, was visited by Saka. Saka was impressed by his diligence, and he manifested it for him, and he offered the hermit a boon. You can have one wish, anything you want, I'll grant you. And the hermit said, I wish you would just leave and never come back again because you're too much of a distraction to my meditation. Well, I don't think I'd be quite as, I don't think I would be quite as bold as that. Not sure what I would ask him. Maybe ask him about the Buddha because he met the Buddha. What was the Buddha like in person? What is the connection between infinite space and first Arupa realm and the space around us? That's really the same thing. Um, and actually, thank you for that question because that brings up another aspect of space in the Buddhist thought is the base of boundless space. The first formless jhana is attained by removing the objects from space and just being aware of the underlying space. So it's an approach to emptiness. There's no real existential difference between that and the space around us, but there's a conceptual difference in that we're paying attention to the space rather than to the objects. Is animita samadhi, concentration of signless, same as nirodha sampati? I don't think they're precisely the same thing. Signless samadhi is named for the entrance into nibbana through contemplation on impermanence. Nirodha sampati is a meditative state that is attained only by anagamis and arahants, which is basically an immersion into nibbana. So there's a technical difference between them. The experience of nibbana would be the same. Does non-self follow from impermanence? Yeah, all three characteristics relate to each other. I wouldn't say any of them really is primary to the other ones, but they all kind of derive from each other mutually. And because of impermanence, there's no abiding permanent self. Contemplation of impermanence can lead on into contemplation of not self because you see no continuity here. There's just the consciousness arising to an object again and again. How does Theravada interpret the universe and the simulation hypothesis? Well, I think in a way that's a kind of impossible to answer because the simulation hypothesis is not something that could possibly have occurred to anyone in the ancient times. If I was looking at it, I would say that the universe, the world is, I would express it this way, that it is in a sense a simulation, but it's a simulation of our own making. I don't think it's some master computer programmer has created a simulation that we're in. But we are simulating the universe based on sense data all the time. If we have experience of being conscious but no one being there, is that stream entry or something else? I don't think that alone would be a touchstone for stream entry, um, but it's tending in the right direction. So if there's no space, is there distance? Um, well, I think the answer that the the theoretical answer that would be given by the old commentators would be that distance is real, but space is an abstraction. That it's 150 yojanas or whatever between Rajagaha and Varanasi, but uh, that's a mental construction we put onto a physical reality. Did there really existed only one type of time and space in India? There were different types of samanas and Brahmananical philosophies as well. Yes, of course, there were many different theories, and India was rife with the philosophical speculation. But I think there is a kind of a broad cultural sense of these things that can be expressed in different modes, in different details and technicalities by different schools. Um, and there may even be some dissenters who completely break away from the cultural norm. But it seems to me that the idea of time being vast and cyclical was common to most of India, and which would include pre-Buddhist and Buddhist and post-Buddhist. Einstein once said, "Time was created so all events don't happen at once." Yeah, that's a clever quip. I don't have anything. I guess you could also apply that to space and say that space was created so that, else if everything was in the same point, it would be very crowded. Could Saka grant us Buddhahood, or is that outside his limits? Oh, that's way outside his limits. No one can grant Buddhahood. It has to be attained through one's own effort. Okay, I think we'll wind it down. I'll see if there's one or two more that I can answer, and I'll call it. Is the speed frequency of chitta the same for all beings, gods and humans? That is an interesting speculate. That's an interesting question to speculate about. It's not really. I don't think I've never found that really defined as such, but there is definitely a sense of time being different or experienced differently by the Dewas. That you know, there's this well-known story of the Dewa who died from the Dewa realm reappeared on Earth with the memory of her past life, and she spent her whole life practicing for rebirth in the Dewa world to get back where she left. And she lived a long life, over 100 years, and reappeared in the Dewa world. And her friends hadn't really noticed she was gone. It was just like a few moments of their time. So that would indicate there's some difference of time flow, or maybe on the consciousness level, or maybe a difference of speed and frequency of chitta. It's possible. Okay, I'll just do this one more question. Uh, I hope it is okay to ask a question related to Vipassana. When you are with anicca, are you automatically equanimous, or do you have to be aware that you are equanimous? Um, I think that if you're really seeing an anicca, then yeah, that will lead to equanimity. It may not occur immediately or instantaneously. Uh, it's a development to reach a stage of equanimity that can be grounded on impermanence. So I don't think it's automatic in that way. And then yes, you would be aware that you're quantumous. There's no, you do have that sense of it. So I think I'll stop there for now. It's getting close to an hour, and thank you. That was a good session, and I'll see you next week, and we'll find something else to talk about.